I didn't know my entire marriage was going to end because of one living room intervention. Not a screaming fight, not a slam door, not even a confession. Just a circle of women sitting on my couch like a jury, wine glasses in hand, legs crossed, eyes polished with certainty, while my husband stood behind them, calm as a man watching a plan unfold. "Say it," Megan urged, glancing at him like she was waiting for approval. He gave the smallest nod. And then they started. One by one, they listed my failures, like they'd practiced in the car. "That you're emotionally closed off," Megan said, voice sharp. "That you make him feel guilty for spending time with friends. That you're controlling about money." My hands stayed folded in my lap, but I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. Dana leaned forward, gentler, almost apologetic, like the knife would hurt less if she smiled. "You don't seem interested in his daily life anymore. You've gotten comfortable. The spark is gone and you're not fighting to get it back." Then Qley, the one who always laughed too loudly at parties, tilted her phone slightly, recording, and delivered the final blow. "We've all noticed how disconnected you are. You barely participate. Honestly," she shrugged, "I don't even understand why Ethan stayed with you this long." The whole time, my husband, watched me like he was waiting for my face to crack. And he smiled when the criticism got personal. That's when I realized something colder than shock. This wasn't concern. This was theater. They weren't here to save our marriage. They were here to watch me lose my dignity so Ethan could walk away looking like the victim. I looked at each of them, memorizing the dates they threw at me as examples, memorizing the smug rhythm of their voices, memorizing my husband's silence. And I made a decision so quiet, none of them noticed. I wasn't going to give them the breakdown they came for. When the room finally went silent, when they all stared, hungry for tears, I stood up slowly and said with a small, careful smile, "Thank you. That was clarifying." Then I turned to Ethan, and I told him I'd work on all those issues in my next relationship. His smile vanished, and that was the first moment I knew. Whatever Ethan was hiding, it was already bigger than this room. I'm Lena Karishma, 32 years old, project manager at a mid-sized tech firm. One of those jobs that looks calm on paper and eats your nervous system in real life. I've always been the type of woman who solves problems quietly. I don't yell. I don't throw things. I make lists. I book appointments. I fix what can be fixed. That personality worked beautifully for building a life. It worked terribly in a marriage with a man who confused peace with permission. I met Ethan 6 years ago at a friend's rooftop birthday party. One of those summer nights where the city smells like warm concrete and cocktails. I was standing near the railing, watching strangers laugh like they'd known each other forever, when Ethan came over with 2 drinks. "Do you look that serious at everything?" he asked, "or only at parties?" I remember the way he said it, teasing, warm, like he'd already decided he liked me. I laughed, surprised at myself. "Only when I'm trying to figure out if the guacamole is worth the price." He grinned. "It's not, but you look like the kind of person who deserves better guacamole than this." He was charming in a way that felt effortless. Not flashy, not arrogant, just confident. He asked questions. He listened. He walked me to my car and texted the next day, not with a lazy, "hey," but with an actual plan. For the first year, it felt easy. Ethan was affectionate, thoughtful. He'd pull me into him at crosswalks. He'd kiss my forehead when I was stressed. He'd send me memes at lunch and call them research because he said laughter was a survival skill. And I, because I'm me, did what I always do when I love someone. I built around him. I made space in my routine. I learned his favorite takeout. I kept track of his family birthdays. I started imagining the rest of my life with his laugh in the background. When he proposed, it was simple. No crowd, no cameras. Just a small box in his hand on our weekend trip, his voice shaking slightly. "I don't want a life that doesn't include you," he said. I cried, ugly cried. The kind where you can't speak and you hate how your nose looks. I said yes. And for a while, being his wife felt like stepping into a version of myself I'd always wanted. Secure, chosen, steady. But even early on, there were tiny things I told myself didn't matter. His friendships were intense, especially with the women in his circle. Jessica, Megan, Dana, Qley. They'd been around since college. They were loud, bonded, and protective of him in a way that sometimes felt less like friendship and more like ownership. At first, I tried to see it as a good sign. He has people who love him. That means he's lovable. But there were moments, little cuts, that didn't bleed until later. Jessica calling me sweetie in that tone that wasn't sweet at all. Megan joking, "Don't ruin him," like I was a risk. Qley taking pictures at parties and tagging Ethan with captions like, "My favorite man." I'd laugh along because I didn't want to be that wife. The insecure one, the controlling one, the one who polices friendships. And Ethan, when I'd gently bring it up, always made it sound like my discomfort was the problem. "They're like sisters," he'd say, rolling his eyes lightly. "You're reading into it." So I trained myself to swallow it. We bought a townhouse 2 years into the marriage. Nothing insane, but nice. A little too expensive for comfort. We split everything the way modern couples do. Shared accounts for bills, separate spending money, one joint credit card for household things. I thought that structure would protect us. I didn't realize structure doesn't protect you when the person sharing it decides rules don't apply to him. The truth is, Ethan and I didn't fall apart in one dramatic explosion. We cracked in slow motion. Work got busy, my deadlines got heavier. Ethan started staying out later. More boys' nights, more work drinks, more "I'm exhausted, can we talk later?" Later became a habit. And in the spaces where intimacy used to live, something else grew. Distance, suspicion, a quiet dread I couldn't name, only feel, like a cold hand on the back of my neck. By the time he staged that living room intervention, I had already been living in a marriage that felt staged. Like I was playing the role of wife in a story Ethan was secretly rewriting without me. And I still didn't know the worst part yet. Because while those women were telling me I was emotionally closed off, I was starting to realize Ethan had been emotionally gone for months. And people don't disappear like that without somewhere else to go. Looking back, the signs weren't dramatic. They were inconvenient. Easy to explain away if you wanted to keep believing the version of your marriage that felt safer. Ethan started becoming selective with his attention. Not absent, just edited. He'd sit beside me on the couch, scrolling through his phone, thumb moving fast, smiling at something I wasn't invited to see. When I asked what was funny, he'd angle the screen away and say, "Just a stupid group chat," like the question itself was exhausting. Dinner conversations turned shallow. Updates instead of intimacy. "How was your day?" "Fine." "Busy." "Tiring." No follow-up. No curiosity. If I tried to talk about something that mattered, work stress, a fight with my sister, even a show I was excited about, he'd nod, distracted, eyes flicking back to his phone like he was waiting for permission to leave the moment. And when I noticed, when I said something, that's when the gaslighting crept in. "You're overthinking. You're always so tense lately. Why does everything have to be a big emotional conversation?" I started hearing my own voice in my head before I spoke, editing myself, shrinking questions, choosing silence because it was easier than being told I was too much. His friends noticed the shift before I fully admitted it. Or maybe they helped create it. Jessica started making comments in public. "Lena's basically married to her job," she laughed once at a dinner party, clinking her glass. "Ethan's practically single half the week." Everyone laughed, including Ethan. I smiled too, because that's what women do when they don't want to be labeled difficult. Megan would pull Ethan aside at gatherings, whispering with exaggerated seriousness, then glance at me like I was a topic that needed managing. Qley began inviting Ethan to things without me. "Just a casual night," she'd say when I found out later. "Didn't think you'd be interested." Dana was the only one who looked uncomfortable sometimes. She'd meet my eyes across the table, hesitate, then look away, like she knew something but wasn't ready to name it. The house felt different too. Charged. Like a place people slept in, not lived in. Ethan started showering the moment he got home. His phone was always face down. Password changed, notifications silenced. One night I reached for it absent-mindedly, just to check the time, and he snatched it back so fast his reaction startled both of us. "Don't," he said sharply. There was a beat of silence. Then he softened his voice. "Sorry, work stuff, confidential." I nodded. I didn't believe him. That was the first time I felt it clearly, the unease settling in my chest. Not dramatic enough to justify confrontation, but too persistent to ignore. I started noticing patterns. Late nights that didn't align with deadlines. Restaurant charges that were high. Not outrageous, just higher than one person eating alone. Weekdays, not weekends. Excuses that sounded reasonable until you stacked them next to each other and realized they didn't form a picture. Just noise. Still, I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I wasn't going to be paranoid. I wasn't going to become the woman who checks receipts and phone logs and starts wars without proof. And part of me, if I'm honest, didn't want to know, because knowing would mean choosing. And choosing would mean admitting the marriage I worked so hard to protect was already rotting from the inside. Then came the emotional distancing disguised as honesty. Ethan started saying things like, "I don't feel supported. I feel lonely even when you're here. I need space to breathe." The language was rehearsed, polished, like something he'd practiced out loud before bringing it home. And every time he said it, I felt myself shrinking, apologizing for crimes I didn't understand, promising to be better at a game whose rules kept changing. That's the part people don't talk about. Betrayal doesn't start with another body. It starts with narrative control. By the time Ethan staged that intervention, he'd already told a story about me. A story where I was cold, controlling, unloving, and his friends believed it. What I didn't realize yet was that the dates they used as proof, the nights they accused me of being distant, lined up perfectly with the nights Ethan wasn't actually alone. At the time, I just felt cornered, judged, outnumbered. I thought the intervention was the attack. I didn't know it was the cover. And I didn't know yet that I already had more information than Ethan realized. Because while he was busy rewriting our marriage out loud, I had started listening in a different way. Quietly. Carefully. And once you start listening like that, the truth gets louder every day. The night of the intervention didn't feel real at first. It felt staged, like I'd walked into the wrong living room, into a scene meant for someone else, and no one had bothered to check whether I'd agreed to be in the cast. They sat in a loose semicircle on my couch. My couch. Wine glasses catching the light, jackets draped comfortably over chairs like they planned to stay a while. Ethan stood near the window, arms crossed, watching rain streak down the glass, as if he were the only one in the room allowed privacy. Megan started, then Dana, then Qley. Each sentence landed with intention, no overlap, no confusion. They passed the conversation to one another smoothly, like they'd rehearsed the order so no one would interrupt the rhythm. And Ethan, my husband, said nothing. He didn't defend me. He didn't correct them. He didn't even look uncomfortable. He watched. What hurt wasn't the criticism itself. It was the way no, not Emily anymore. That wasn't my name. I stood there being dissected, while the person who promised to protect me silently approved the process. I remember noticing small, ridiculous details. The hum of the refrigerator. The way Qley's phone was angled just enough to capture my face. The faint smell of red wine on Megan's breath. And the dates? That's what snaps something into focus. October 8th, late September, midweek nights. They said them casually, like evidence of my emotional absence. But in my body, something clicked. Those were the nights. The nights Ethan had come home late claiming work drinks. The nights I'd eaten dinner alone. The nights my messages had gone unanswered for hours. This wasn't concern. This was cover. I sat there quietly, hands folded, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I didn't cry. I didn't interrupt. I didn't give them the reaction they were hunting for, and that confused them. They expected a performance. They wanted tears, apologies, promises, maybe anger, something they could point to later and say, "See, this is why." Instead, I watched. I watched Ethan's jaw tighten when Qley got especially cruel. I watched his eyes flicker, not with guilt, but calculation. I watched the way his friends fed off each other's certainty, growing bolder with each accusation. When they finally finished, the silence was thick. Everyone stared at me, waiting. I stood slowly. My legs felt oddly steady, like my body had already decided something my mind hadn't fully caught up to yet. "Thank you," I said softly. They blinked. That was clarifying. Confusion rippled through the room. I turned to Ethan. He looked smug, relieved almost, like he thought I was about to beg. "I hear everything you're saying," I continued calmly, "and I agree. Those are things I'll work on." His shoulders relaxed. In my next relationship, the room froze. Megan's mouth fell open. Dana stared at her lap. Qley's phone lowered. Ethan's face drained of color so fast, it almost scared me. "We'll discuss logistics tomorrow," I added, my voice steady. "But tonight, I'll be staying somewhere else." Ethan stepped forward. "Lena, wait!" "No," I said, not raising my voice. "You wanted clarity. This is it." I walked to the bedroom, grabbed the gym bag I always kept packed, old habit from work travel, and added my laptop, charger, clothes for Monday. My hands moved automatically, efficient, familiar. When I came back through the living room, they were whispering frantically, like the script had gone off the rails. Ethan tried to grab my arm. I stepped back. "I won't do this," I said quietly. "Not tonight." I walked out into the rain. By the time I reached my car, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Calls, texts, voicemails stacking up like evidence I wasn't ready to review yet. I didn't answer. I drove north to a hotel. Clean, quiet, anonymous. The kind of place where nothing expects anything from you. I checked in, closed the door, and finally sat down. That's when the shaking started. Not sobbing. Not hysteria. Just my hands trembling as the adrenaline drained out of my body. I sent Ethan one message. "I'll come by tomorrow around 2 to get more clothes. Please make sure your friends aren't there." Then I did something I'd never done before. I logged into our joint credit card account, and within minutes, the patterns I'd been trying not to see jumped off the screen. Restaurant charges that didn't make sense. Hotels during work hours. Weekdays. Same places, same rhythms. My stomach dropped, not from shock, but from confirmation. This wasn't paranoia. This was math, and the numbers were about to tell me everything Ethan had been hiding. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was crying, surprisingly, I wasn't, but because my mind had shifted into a strange clinical calm, the kind that comes when emotion steps aside and something colder, sharper takes over. I sat at the small hotel desk, city lights blurred by rain outside the window, and stared at the credit card statements on my laptop. At first, I told myself to slow down, to be fair, to assume coincidence. But patterns don't care about fairness. They just exist. There were restaurant charges on nights Ethan had told me he was grabbing drinks with friends. Not bar tabs, full dinners, 2 entrees, wine. Places you don't go alone unless you enjoy pretending someone's across from you. October 8th stood out immediately. A $193 charge at a high-end steakhouse. That night, Ethan had texted me casually. "Out with Jessica, don't wait up." I opened social media. Jessica had posted that same evening. Movie night at home with her husband, feet in pajamas, popcorn bowl balanced on her lap. My chest tightened, not in panic, but in clarity. Then came the hotel charges. A boutique hotel downtown. Day rate charges. No overnights. September 15th. September 23rd. October 10th. October 24th. All weekdays. All during work hours. All on days Ethan had said he was staying late at the office. I opened a spreadsheet. Date. Amount. Location. What Ethan told me. what the evidence suggested. By the time I finished, the total sat there quietly at the bottom. $3,400 over 8 months. Not devastating money, but devastating truth. I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes, and felt it. Not rage, not grief, but something heavier. Responsibility, not for his choices, for mine. For every time I'd felt the shift and talked myself out of it. For every moment I'd chosen peace over honesty. For every instinct I'd buried because I didn't want to be that woman. I whispered into the empty room. What did I ignore? The answer came immediately. Everything that made me uncomfortable. I pulled up our shared phone records next. One number appeared again and again. Daily contact. Texts, calls, late nights, early mornings, 153 interactions in 3 months. The number wasn't saved under any name I recognized. My hands hovered over the keyboard for a moment. This was the point of no return. I typed it into a reverse lookup service. The name came back clean and sharp on the screen. Marissa Chen, age 34, Seattle area. I felt a strange stillness settle over me. Social media filled in the rest. Marissa and Ethan had gone to the same high school. Old comments on photos. Inside jokes from years ago. A familiarity that didn't need reintroduction. 8 months ago, Marissa's relationship status had changed from in a relationship to it's complicated. Recent photos placed her in the exact restaurants listed on my spreadsheet. The same lighting, the same plates, the same city skyline in the background. I didn't cry. I saved everything. Screenshots, statements, phone records, timelines. 3 copies, 3 locations. Because shock fades, evidence doesn't. My phone buzzed again. Ethan this time. We need to talk. This is ridiculous. I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. We already talked. You were very clear. That's not what I meant, he wrote immediately. I typed slowly, deliberately. That's exactly what you meant. And you said it in front of witnesses. Silence. The next morning, I woke with a headache and a strange sense of calm. Not peace, but resolve. At 9:15 a.m., I walked into a law office on the 45th floor of a downtown building, rain still clinging to my coat. The view overlooked the water, gray, steady, unbothered. I placed my folder on the desk between me and the attorney. She flipped through it quietly. Then she looked up at me and said, "This is remarkably thorough." And for the first time since the intervention, I exhaled. Not because it hurt less, but because I knew I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dramatic. And I wasn't wrong. I was just done pretending. Patricia Sanders didn't rush. She read every page the way surgeons read scans, quiet, focused, already mapping outcomes in her head. When she finally looked up, her expression wasn't shocked or sympathetic. It was impressed. "How long have you suspected?" she asked. 2 months for certain, I said. 4 more of something being wrong. She nodded. Most people confront immediately. They yell, accuse, demand answers, and lose evidence. You didn't. I didn't tell her that part of me had wanted to scream, that I'd rehearsed 100 confrontations in my head and chosen silence every time. I'd thought that restraint made me weak. Patricia reframed it in one sentence. It gave you leverage. She asked about the intervention, who was there, what was said, whether anyone recorded it. I told her Qley had her phone out. Patricia smiled slightly. That helps. Public humiliation attempts with witnesses demonstrate intent and character. She explained the legal landscape calmly, clinically. Our state had community property laws, but misuse of shared funds for an affair changed things. We could pursue reimbursement. We could pursue the house or full compensation. When she asked about the down payment, I slid another document forward. $90,000, I said. From my grandmother's inheritance, separate account, before the marriage. Patricia's eyebrows lifted. Perfect. The word landed heavier than comfort ever could. She outlined the strategy. File this week. Serve papers at Ethan's workplace. Push for a separation agreement. No emotional conversations. No defending myself. Everything through her. Be prepared, she added. When control slips, people escalate. Accusations, guilt, revisionist history. I nodded. What about his friends? I asked. Patricia paused. Do they know about the affair? I don't think so. Her smile returned, small, knowing. Interesting. People who stage public humiliations usually do it from a place of moral superiority. When that foundation collapses, things get educational. Before the papers were served, I needed more clothes. Saturday at 2, I pulled into the driveway of the townhouse. Ethan's car was there. No other vehicles. Good. He opened the door before I reached for my key. His eyes were red, hair uncombed. He looked smaller somehow, like a man whose audience had left and taken the script with them. Thank God you're here, he said quickly. Can we please talk about Friday? I'm here for clothes, I said, stepping past him. He followed me to the bedroom, talking fast, words tripping over each other. You can't seriously be planning to leave over this. It was supposed to help us. They were trying to support us. I stopped and turned. How, I asked calmly, was 2 hours of your friends tearing me down while you smiled supposed to help our marriage? He faltered. I thought if you heard it from other people, you'd actually listen. I listened, I said, every word. I started packing. Then I decided to stop protecting him from himself. Where were you on October 8th? I asked casually. He blinked. What? You texted me that night saying you were with Jessica. Where were you really? With Jessica, he said too quickly. Why? Because Jessica posted that night about being home with her husband, I said, folding a sweater. Movie night, pajamas. So, where were you? The color drained from his face. I don't remember every night, he snapped. I turned my phone toward him. $193. Steakhouse. Dinner for 2. He swallowed. Maybe Megan, I nodded. Okay, then explain the hotel charges. September 15th. September 23rd. October 10th. October 24th. All weekdays. All-day rates. All nights he told me he was working late. What are you doing? He demanded. Are you spying on me now? I held up the screenshots. Who is Marissa Chen? I asked. The room went very still. He didn't even pretend this time. I told him what I knew. High school connection, reconnection 8 months ago, daily contact, hotels, restaurants. How long? I asked. He started crying. Not quietly. It's not what you think, he said. It wasn't physical at first. The receipts say otherwise. He broke then, confessions spilling out in fragments. Marissa understood him. I was always busy. He felt unseen. He didn't mean for it to go this far. And Friday, I asked, was that your exit strategy? Make me the villain so you could leave without being the bad guy? No, he said quickly. I wanted you to change so I wouldn't need her. So you did need her, I said, without emotion. He tried another angle. He'd end it. We'd go to counseling. We could fix this. After you orchestrated a public humiliation, I asked. After 8 months of lying? My friends didn't know, he said desperately. They just thought you were neglectful. You're right, I said. They didn't know. And that's exactly why they're going to be very upset when they find out. His eyes widened. What do you mean? I'm filing for divorce this week, I said, and they'll learn exactly why. He panicked, talking about our years together, our home, our history. It counts, I said. It counts enough that I deserved honesty, not an ambush. I zipped the suitcase. My attorney will be in touch, I said. You already hired one? He asked, stunned. Saturday morning. I paused at the door. You staged an intervention to end this marriage, I said. Congratulations. It worked. Behind me, he was still insisting he wanted me to fight for him. I turned back once. Why would I fight for someone who thinks humiliation is acceptable? Then I left. 3 days later, the papers were served, Wednesday morning, at the coffee shop where Ethan met his friends. Jessica and Megan were there. They watched his face go white. And suddenly, the story he'd been telling started collapsing. Loudly. My phone exploded. Calls, texts, voicemails. I answered none of them. Because escalation isn't always shouting. Sometimes it's letting the truth walk into a room on its own. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. After the papers were served, everything went quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like the air right before a storm finally decides where to break. I stayed at my friend Tom's place, sleeping in his guest room with borrowed pillows and unfamiliar ceilings. He was kind in the way good friends are when they don't know what to say. Coffee already made in the morning, a simple, "You okay?" that didn't demand an answer. At night, when the house settled, that's when it hit. Not the anger, not the betrayal, the emptiness. I lay awake staring at the dark, replaying the intervention on a loop. Not because I missed Ethan, but because I couldn't understand how someone could sit across from me, watch me be dismantled, and call it love. I kept seeing his face when I said, "my next relationship." The shock, the fear, the sudden realization that he had lost control of the narrative, and then the quieter thought followed. What if I was wrong about everything else? That's the part no one prepares you for. The moment your certainty collapses inward and starts questioning you instead of them. What if I had been distant? What if I had missed signs? What if I'd worked less, asked different questions, softened more? It wasn't guilt for his affair. It was grief for the version of myself that kept trying to earn safety by being reasonable. My phone buzzed constantly. Jessica left 3 voicemails in one night, her tone escalating from furious to pleading. "Lena, you're destroying him. This didn't have to be like this. You're being cruel now." Megan texted paragraphs about forgiveness, about marriage being hard, about mistakes. Dana sent one message, just one. "I hope you're okay. I didn't know. I'm so sorry." Qley called from blocked numbers, over and over. I didn't respond. But the messages crawled under my skin anyway, whispering doubts I didn't need help hearing. By Thursday night, the weight of it all pressed down so hard I could barely breathe. I sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, hands shaking, not with panic, but with exhaustion. I felt hollowed out, used up, like I'd been carrying something heavy for so long that setting it down left me unbalanced. This was the lowest point. Not because I wanted him back, but because I had to face the truth that the marriage I mourned didn't exist anymore, and maybe never had. I cried then, quietly. The kind of crying that doesn't look dramatic, but leaves your chest sore the next day. I cried for the woman who believed love meant patience at any cost, for the nights I'd waited up, for the instincts I'd silenced, for the trust I'd handed over without asking whether it was being respected. I cried because walking away, even from something broken, still feels like loss. Friday morning, I woke with swollen eyes and a decision I didn't feel strong enough to make, but knew I would. I wasn't going to explain myself. I wasn't going to defend my dignity. I wasn't going to fight for people who only respected me when I stayed quiet. That afternoon, Patricia called. "I received a call from Jessica Hayes," she said evenly. My stomach dropped. "She said you're being unreasonable," Patricia continued, "that this is all a misunderstanding, that you're refusing to communicate." I closed my eyes. "That's accurate," I said. "I am refusing." Patricia paused. "Good. Stay that course." Then she added, almost casually, "But it gave me an idea." She explained it slowly. If Ethan's friends were so invested, if they'd been present for the humiliation, perhaps they should also be present for the truth. A meeting, formal, documented, evidence laid out cleanly. "Would you be willing?" she asked. I thought about Friday night, about Qley's phone, about the way they'd watched me like entertainment. "Yes," I said, "I would." When the call ended, I sat there in silence, heart pounding, not with fear this time, but with something else. Resolve. I wasn't going to punish anyone. I wasn't going to seek revenge. I was simply going to stop protecting Ethan from the consequences of his own choices. And as terrifying as that felt, it was also the first moment since the intervention that I felt solid again. Like my feet were touching ground instead of free-falling through someone else's version of the truth. This wasn't the end, but it was the bottom. And from here, there was only one direction left to go. Friday afternoon, rain traced slow lines down the glass walls of Patricia's conference room, turning the city beyond into something distant and blurred. The table was long, polished, impersonal. Neatly stacked folders waited at each seat like quiet witnesses. I arrived first. I sat straight-backed, hands folded, breathing evenly, steady on the outside, braced on the inside. This wasn't about confrontation. It wasn't even about vindication. It was about truth finally being allowed to speak without interruption. Ethan arrived next with his attorney. He looked exhausted, eyes rimmed red, shoulders slumped, confidence drained. He didn't meet my gaze, not once. Then the door opened again. Jessica, Megan, Dana, Qley. They entered together, confusion written openly on their faces. Jessica whispered something sharp under her breath. Megan scanned the room, uneasy. Dana looked nervous. Qley glanced around like she was trying to figure out who was in control now, and realizing it wasn't her. Patricia stood. She introduced herself, then Ethan's attorney. Her voice was calm, professional, unhurried. "I understand some of you are here for support," she said, nodding toward the women. "That's fine, but you'll be hearing private information today. If anyone feels uncomfortable, you're free to leave." No one moved. "Excellent," Patricia said. She explained the basics: divorce petition, reimbursement of misappropriated shared funds, division of assets, claim on the house, or equivalent compensation. Ethan's attorney began to speak, until Patricia gently raised a hand. "These terms are based on documented evidence of financial misconduct," she said. "It may help if everyone understands that evidence." She slid the first set of documents across the table. Credit card statements, highlighted, dated. The women leaned in instinctively. Jessica frowned. "Why do restaurant charges matter? People eat out." "Of course," Patricia replied, "but let's look at specifics." She tapped the page. October 8th, steakhouse, $193, dinner for two. She turned slightly toward Jessica. "You were with Ethan that night?" Jessica froze. No, she said slowly. "That was movie night with my husband." The room shifted. Megan's eyes moved from the paper to Ethan. Dana's lips parted slightly. Patricia continued. Hotel charges, boutique hotel, day rates, September 15th, September 23rd, October 10th, October 24th. All weekdays, Patricia said, all during work hours, all times Ethan told his wife he was working late or meeting friends. Qley squinted at the page. "Why would he need a hotel in the city? We all live here." No one answered. Patricia opened another folder. Phone records. One number appears 153 times in 3 months, she said evenly. Daily contact. She said the name out loud. Marissa Chen. Dana's voice trembled. His ex-girlfriend from high school? Ethan didn't look up. They reconnected 8 months ago, Patricia continued. Social media confirms regular meetings. The same restaurants, the same dates, hotels. Jessica turned sharply toward Ethan. "You were seeing Marissa?" He whispered. "It wasn't like that." Qley lifted her head, anger flaring. "We spent 2 hours last Friday tearing Lena apart because you told us she was the problem." Dana's voice broke. "You let us ambush her. You sat there smiling." For the first time, I spoke. "I worked normal hours," I said calmly. "He needed me to be neglectful to justify what he was doing. So he told a story, and you believed it." Jessica looked at me, stunned. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I wanted to see how far he'd go," I replied. "Pretty far, it turns out." Patricia pressed on. "Ethan," she said, "did you inform any of these women about Marissa before the intervention?" Silence. "No," he whispered. Patricia nodded. "Then these women were used, unknowingly, to provide cover for infidelity. The impact was immediate." Jessica stood abruptly, chair scraping. "You made us hurt her. You made us weapons." Megan's hands shook. "Qley recorded it," she said quietly. "Some of it went on social media." Qley went pale. "I deleted it." "How many people saw it?" Dana asked. "About 50. Jessica stared at Ethan like she didn't recognize him. I defended you. I told her she was lucky. I said awful things because you told me to. One by one, they stood. I'm done, Jessica said. Don't call me. Megan followed, silent and furious. Dana stopped by me, eyes wet. I'm so sorry. You were manipulated, I said gently. That matters. Qley left without a word. When the door closed, Ethan sat alone, except for his attorney. Patricia laid out the settlement numbers. Reimbursement, equity, fees. Total, $283,000. Ethan's attorney exhaled slowly. My client will agree. Ethan finally looked at me. Are you happy now? No, I said evenly. You destroyed everything. I just refused to go down with it. As the meeting ended, I realized something quietly profound. I didn't feel powerful because he'd fallen. I felt powerful because I no longer needed to hold him up. That was the turning point. Not the evidence, not the money, but the moment I understood completely that my worth didn't depend on being believed by people who never questioned the wrong person. The collapse didn't happen all at once. It happened in waves. Quiet at first, then unavoidable. Within days of the meeting, Ethan's carefully maintained world began to unravel in directions he could no longer control. The same friends who had once spoken with certainty about my flaws stopped answering his calls. Group chats went silent. Invitations disappeared. The moral ground he'd built his story on had vanished, and without it, no one knew where to stand with him anymore. Jessica blocked him outright. Megan sent one final message, short, restrained, devastating. You made us hurt someone who didn't deserve it. Don't contact me again. Dana unfollowed him on everything. I heard later she'd cried for days, not for the marriage, but for the shame of realizing how easily she'd been manipulated into cruelty. Qley deleted her accounts for a while. 50 people had seen those recordings. Screenshots don't disappear just because you want them to. Ethan called me 12 times in one afternoon. I didn't answer. He texted, You didn't have to do this. They were my friends. You ruined everything. I replied once. All communication goes through attorneys. After that, I put my phone face down and went for a walk. Something I hadn't done in months without checking the time, without waiting for a message, without feeling like I was abandoning something unfinished. The air felt different, lighter. Ethan showed up at Tom's house that Wednesday evening. I heard his voice through the door, tight, pleading, familiar in a way that no longer reached me. I just need 5 minutes, he said, face to face. No, I replied through the closed door. Everything goes through attorneys. You're really going to throw away 6 years? He asked, voice breaking. I'm not throwing anything away, I said calmly. You did. Friday night and 8 months before that. He tried guilt, memory, nostalgia. I stayed silent. Eventually, he left. Thursday afternoon, Patricia called. They've agreed to the terms, she said. House sale, full reimbursement, legal fees. The total came to $279,000 after everything settled. Money doesn't heal betrayal, but it does restore balance. 3 months later, I sat in Patricia's office again, this time signing the final divorce papers. The pen felt heavier than I expected, not with regret, but with finality. When I finished, she asked gently, What's next? I bought a condo, I said. Smaller. Mine. She smiled. That's a good choice. Ethan moved out of the townhouse before it sold. Last I heard, he was renting a room across town. The relationship with Marissa ended 2 weeks after the meeting. Apparently, she hadn't signed up for exposure or consequences. Funny how affairs survive secrecy but die in daylight. Ethan changed jobs. Too many people knew. Too many questions followed him into rooms he couldn't escape. His parents called me once, confused, embarrassed, careful with their words. I told them I wished Ethan well and ended the call politely. I didn't need their validation. 5 months after the divorce, my life had settled into something unexpectedly gentle. Morning light through my windows, coffee I drank hot instead of reheated, work that felt focused again, rewarding even. I received a promotion I'd quietly been in line for. my performance finally uninterrupted by emotional chaos. Tom asked one evening if I was dating. "Not yet," I said. "I'm enjoying the quiet." He nodded like he understood. He told me he'd heard Ethan was still struggling. Therapy, lost friendships, the slow realization that none of it could be blamed on me anymore. I felt nothing about that. Not satisfaction. Not sadness. Just distance. The kind that means healing has already started. The truth is, fallout doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like doors closing gently, but permanently. Sometimes it's not revenge, it's alignment. And for the first time since that living room intervention, my life felt aligned with who I actually was. Not the wife trying to earn peace. Not the woman shrinking to preserve someone else's comfort. Just me. Standing in my own space, unapologetic, and finally free to move forward without dragging someone else's lies behind me. 1 year after that Friday night intervention, I sat on my balcony with a mug of coffee warming my hands, watching November rain turn the streets below into ribbons of light. The city moved the way it always had, unconcerned, alive, steady. For the first time in a long while, I felt the same. My phone rang. It was my brother, checking in because he remembered the date. I laughed softly at that, how time stamps itself into the body. "How are you?" he asked. "I'm good," I said, surprised by how true it felt. Really good. I told him about the new furniture I'd bought that week, how the place finally felt like mine. I told him I'd gone on a few dates. Nothing serious, no urgency. I told him I liked the quiet. "You sound lighter," he said. "I am," I replied. I didn't realize how heavy that relationship had become. Constant guessing, constant performing, constant trying to be enough for someone who was already writing reasons I wasn't. After we hung up, I stayed there with my coffee, listening to the rain. A year ago, Ethan thought he was ending our marriage on his terms. His friends, his script, his audience. He expected me to break, to beg, to give him the drama that would justify the story he'd been telling himself. Instead, I gave him agreement. And in that agreement, I took back every ounce of power he thought he had. The intervention was supposed to expose my flaws. It turned out to be a mirror. I learned that love without respect is just slow motion destruction. That silence, chosen, not forced, can be more powerful than any argument. That walking away with dignity beats fighting for scraps every single time. Most importantly, I learned that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so full of peace that the chaos you left behind fades into irrelevance. Ethan wanted me to fight for him, but you don't fight for someone who's already decided you're not worth honesty. You let them go, and you build something better. His friends learned not to be weapons in someone else's war. He learned that public humiliation has consequences. And I learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is calmly agree with someone who's trying to hurt you. 1 year later, I'm not angry, not bitter, not curious about what became of him. I'm free. I set my empty mug down, opened my book, and leaned back into the chair. Rain fell. The city lived. My space, my life, my choice.